The Vatican, 1492. A man kneels before the altar of St. Peter's Basilica. He wears the white robes of the Pope, God's representative on earth, the Holy Father. But this man is no Holy Father. He has 6 children from at least 3 different women. He sells salvation to the highest bidder. He poisons his enemies during communion. And he throws orgies in the papal palace while Rome starves. Tonight we enter the Vatican during its darkest hour, when the throne of St. Peter became a marketplace for sin, when the church was run by a crime family, when the Pope was not a shepherd of souls, but a wolf in shepherd's clothing. This is Pope Alexander VI, born Rodrigo Borgia, the man who turned the papacy into a brothel and the Catholic Church into his personal empire. 1431, Exativa, Spain. A boy is born into the Borgia family, Spanish nobility, but not the highest ranks. They are ambitious, hungry, dangerous. The boy's name, Rodrigo. His uncle, Alonso de Borgia, becomes a cardinal, powerful, connected. And when Alonso becomes Pope Calixtus III in 1455, everything changes. Young Rodrigo, now 24, is made a cardinal, not because of piety, not because of faith, because of blood. This is the Renaissance Church, where positions are bought and sold, where simony, the sale of church offices, is standard practice, where holiness is optional, but connections are essential. Rodrigo learns quickly. He doesn't pretend to be holy. He simply becomes what the Renaissance papacy already is: corrupt, political, brutal, but more efficiently than anyone before him. He rises through the ranks. Vice-Chancellor of the Catholic Church, the Pope's right hand, accumulating wealth, accumulating power, living openly with his mistress, Venosa de Catane. She bears him 4 children, Cesare, Juan, Lucrezia, and Joffre. The Church knows, Rome knows, everyone knows the Vice-Chancellor has a family, and no one does anything, because this is how the game is played. Hypocrisy wrapped in holy robes, sin disguised as salvation. August 1492. Pope Innocent VIII dies. The throne of St. Peter is vacant. The conclave gathers to elect a new pope. 23 cardinals locked in the Sistine Chapel. Praying number, not praying, negotiating. Rodrigo Borgia enters that conclave with a fortune accumulated over 40 years. He bribes, promises positions, offers land, threatens. One cardinal is promised 4 mule loads of silver. Another receives castles and estates. Vote by vote, soul by soul. Rodrigo buys the papacy. August 11th, 1492. The white smoke rises. Rodrigo Borgia becomes Pope Alexander VI, 61 years old. 6 acknowledged children, multiple mistresses, the most openly corrupt cardinal in the church, now sits on the throne of St. Peter. Rome whispers, God help us all. Alexander VI's papacy is not about spreading Christianity, it's about building an empire. The Borgia Empire, with the Vatican as headquarters. His first priority, his children, especially Cesare, his favorite son, brilliant, ruthless, charming, and absolutely amoral. Alexander makes Cesare a cardinal at 18. Cesare doesn't want to be a cardinal, he wants to be a prince, a warlord, a conqueror. Alexander understands, so he uses the church's wealth to fund Cesare's armies, uses papal authority to wage wars, uses spiritual power for temporal conquest. Then there's Lucrezia, Alexander's daughter, beautiful, intelligent, and weaponized. Her father uses her like a political chess piece, marries her off to powerful families to create alliances. When the alliance is no longer useful, the marriage is annulled. She's married 3 times before age 21. Each marriage a transaction, each husband expendable. One of her husbands, Alfonso of Aragon, is murdered. strangled in his bed while recovering from an earlier assassination attempt. By Cesare's order, with Alexander's knowledge, the Pope's own son-in-law, killed in the Vatican itself, but murder is just business in the Borgia Vatican. Alexander develops a specialty: poison. He invites wealthy cardinals to dinner. Communion wine is served, but some wine is different. The cardinal drinks, returns home, develops a fever, dies within days. His wealth confiscated by the Pope. His position sold to the highest bidder. This happens repeatedly, so regularly that Romans develop a dark joke: don't dine with the Borgias. The Vatican becomes a place of terror. Cardinals sleep with guards outside their doors. Wealthy clergy write their wills before visiting the Pope. Everyone knows, in Alexander's Vatican, a dinner invitation might be a death sentence. But Alexander isn't just murdering for money. He's also hosting parties that would make Caligula blush. October 15, 01. The Banquet of Chestnuts. 50 prostitutes are invited to the Vatican, to the papal apartments. They strip naked, crawl on the floor collecting chestnuts, while the Pope, his son Cesare and his daughter Lucrezia watch, and offer prizes for the men who can perform with the most women. This is not rumor. This is documented in the diary of Johannes Burchard, the papal master of ceremonies, who had to organize these events and record them for history. The Pope of the Catholic Church, the Vicar of Christ, hosting sex parties in the Vatican while pretending to represent God. The hypocrisy is not a scandal. It's the entire system. Not everyone bows to the Borgias. Italy's noble families see them for what they are: Spanish upstarts buying their way to power. The Orsini family, the Colonna family, the Sforza family, ancient Roman nobility. They plot, they resist, they refuse to submit. Alexander responds with overwhelming force. He excommunicates them, declares them enemies of the church, sends Cesare with armies to destroy them. One by one, the great families fall. Some submit, some are annihilated. Cesare Borgia becomes the most feared man in Italy. Machiavelli himself studies him, uses him as the model for the prince, the perfect tyrant, efficient, ruthless, successful. But the Borgias have a problem. The problem is named Girolamo Savonarola, a Dominican friar in Florence, a prophet, a zealot, and he's calling out the Pope publicly. Savonarola preaches against corruption, against simony, against the moral decay of the church, and he names Alexander specifically, calls him the devil on the throne of St. Peter, calls for his removal, calls for reformation. Alexander offers Savonarola a cardinal's hat, tries to buy his silence. Savonarola refuses, keeps preaching. Alexander excommunicates him, orders his arrest. Savonarola is captured, tortured, forced to confess to false prophecy. May 23, 1498. Florence, Savonarola is hanged, then burned. His ashes scattered in the Arno River, so no relics remain. The man who dared oppose the Borgia Pope, erased. The message is clear. Challenge Alexander, and not even God will save you. By 1503, Alexander has been Pope for 11 years. He is 72 years old. The Borgia Empire seems unshakable. Cesare controls much of central Italy. Lucrezia is Duchess of Ferrara. The family is at the height of its power, but empires built on corruption are fragile. August 1503. Rome is suffering through a brutal summer. Heat, disease, malaria is spreading through the city. Alexander attends a dinner party at the vineyard of Cardinal Adriano Castellesi, a cardinal known to be very wealthy. Some historians suggest Alexander planned to poison him, to take his fortune, but something goes wrong. Days later, both Alexander and Cesare fall violently ill. High fever, vomiting, delirium. Cesare, younger and stronger, survives. Alexander does not. August 18, 1503, Pope Alexander VI dies. The official cause, malaria. The whispered cause, he drank his own poison by mistake. The Vatican's servants rush to his chambers, strip his body of jewelry, steal everything of value. His corpse swells grotesquely in the summer heat, turns black, becomes so bloated they can barely fit it in the coffin. No grand funeral, no mourning crowds, just a hastily buried body in a city breathing a sigh of relief. Within days, everything collapses. Cesare, still weak from poison, loses all his territories. The Borgia enemies return, the empire crumbles, and the name Borgia becomes synonymous with corruption, with nepotism, with everything wrong with the Renaissance papacy. 500 years have passed since Alexander VI died, yet his shadow still falls across the Catholic Church. He is not remembered as a pope. He is remembered as a warning. So what was Pope Alexander VI? A criminal who bought the papacy? Yes. A father who weaponized his own children? Yes. A murderer who poisoned his enemies? Almost certainly. A man who turned the Vatican into a brothel? Documented fact. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Alexander wasn't an aberration. He was the logical conclusion of a system where spiritual authority could be bought, where celibacy was a rule everyone ignored, where the church was a political entity first and a religious institution second. He was simply better at the game than everyone else, more ruthless, more efficient, more honest about his corruption. The Protestant Reformation begins just 14 years after his death. Martin Luther nails his theses to the church door, citing corruption, citing simony, citing exactly the sins Alexander embodied. In a way, Alexander didn't just corrupt the church, he broke it, shattered the illusion that the papacy was about holiness, proved that spiritual authority without moral foundation is just authority, power without principle. The Catholic Church eventually reformed. The Council of Trent, the Counter-Reformation, rules to prevent another Borgia. But the damage was done. Christianity split, Europe torn apart, wars of religion that would kill millions. All because the throne of St. Peter became a commodity, and Alexander VI was its most successful buyer. Pope Alexander VI reigned for 11 years, built an empire that collapsed within weeks of his death, left a legacy of corruption that helped fracture Christianity itself. But he also proved something that echoes across 5 centuries, that religious authority without moral foundation is worse than no authority at all. That power corrupts not just individuals, but entire institutions. That when spiritual leaders become indistinguishable from secular tyrants, faith itself becomes a lie. So I ask you, was Alexander VI the most corrupt pope in history? Or was he just the most honest about what the Renaissance papacy really was? Did he corrupt the church? Or did he simply reveal the corruption that was always there? What do you think? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want to journey deeper into the darkest corners of history, where power corrupts, faith fails, and empires crumble, subscribe to Dark Ages Chronicles. Because the past is not dead. It's still teaching us, still warning us, still asking, what happens when those who claim to speak for God speak only for themselves?